Are there even good screenplays? So, I never thought that I'd be making this video, much less it'd be my first video, but here we are. So I was just in class earlier today when I'm making this video, and my professor just ripped apart my screenplay. What really made me upset wasn't the fact that she tore it apart, it was the things that she was tearing apart. So at the end of the screenplay, the main character commits suicide. I didn't really overtly say that she commits suicide. I kind of implied heavily that she committed suicide. She is crying, looking at a picture of her boyfriend, ex-best friend, and a bottle of pills, and it cuts to black. The reason that I left it ambiguous was because I've never lived through suicide. Well, no one who's committed suicide has ever lived to see the tale, and I did not want to go out of my way to explain it because I cannot relate. No one can, so it would just be best to leave it up. And she told me that that was not a good reason. So it had me asking, well, what even is a good screenplay? As you might have guessed, a screenplay is completely subjective to whoever is reading it. In order to judge a screenplay, I think you need to be generous to whatever screenplay you are reading. You also have to know what the screenplay is for. For example, my screenplay was made to relate to me and those closest to me. Unfortunately, my professor is not one of my friends, and she did not quite understand anything about my screenplay, why I made the characters act the way they did. So my professor didn't understand my screenplay because my screenplay wasn't made for her. And it's important to keep in mind that your target audience does matter. So this may be a big shocker, but there's something that is interesting to you is not necessarily interesting to everyone else. What do I mean by that? Say you have a rabbit as your main character, and your rabbit is trying very, very hard to hop 3 centimeters higher. Now, on the surface, you could probably make an interesting story out of that, but it's very hard, and if you just like say that might be interesting to you, but it's not really interesting to anyone else. Another thing that screenplays have to be is consistent with themselves. So in the world that you create, it doesn't have to have the same rules and logic as real life. Most of the time that would be boring and nonsensical. But it should have its own established rules in which to follow. Examples that do it well are Lord of the Rings, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe series, Avatar: The Last Airbender. A franchise that doesn't do it well simply because they don't really care is Star Wars. A big thing that you have to keep in mind is what genre you plan to have your script in. You need to know what genre you're writing, and you need to know how to make your story stand out from the tropes while still keeping true to them. And you can interpret that any way you want, because to be honest, it's one of those things where you're like, oh, I want to make a noir film. So you want to make it like every noir film that you have, but you need to have things but you need to set it apart from every other noir movie. And a good example of this is Chinatown, which personally I think it was better than The Godfather. One thing that's huge that people think is nonsensical is your character has to have a flaw. What do I mean by this? No one is perfect. Our own flaws get in the way of our everyday life all the time, and no one wants to watch a movie about someone who their life is just perfect and nothing's wrong, because you already know what's going to happen. Their life will continue to be perfect and they can still do no wrong. But if you give them like a flaw, then the character seems more interesting and in turn is more relatable. One thing you want to consider is how big your main plot is and how long you want your screenplay to be. If you want your screenplay to be fairly long, then you'll have to give like a second plot line to further develop other characters besides the main character, or even develop the main character even further. And the biggest point I want to drive home is it has to be personal. If you're writing something that is not personal to you, there is a good chance it won't be personal to you. And that's all I really have to say today. I didn't want making this video, but my professor kind of enticed me to, because she was very harsh in front of everyone, and it did not make me feel good at all. And it really got me thinking, oh, what's the best way to write a screenplay? And it turns out there is no best way. Everything that I said, even, it's subjective to my own opinion. But if you want other people to read it, the 3 things that you need to have above all else is one, you have to keep your audience in mind. 2, the story has to be personal to you. 3, disregard any of this when you feel the need. That's all I have for today. Thank you for listening if you did. This is the first real video that I've actually done on the channel. There's a lot of public domain stuff that I'm going to be... That's it.